Hey, what's up, guys? It's Apollo Uchiha here, back with another part of What If Naruto Was in a Political Marriage. And today is also going to be a double upload, and I'm going to be making the next part of What If Naruto The Blonde Future as well today, because I'm going to end this series, both of them, as soon as possible so I can work on future projects as well on this channel. If you haven't, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you like the content of this channel. And without further ado, let's begin. Yujito! Naruto! She screamed excitedly from the sky, waving her hands to get her attention. Yujito stopped in her tracks and allowed Tamari to come arrive via her prosthetic. She fell to the earth and hit the ground running. Seeing Yujito had her hands full, she arrived at an excited stop. Yujito, how'd Naruto? Tamari stopped, getting a good look at Naruto's body from up in the sky. It looked like Yujito was merely holding on to Naruto's unconscious form. Now that she was up close and personal, she saw the telltale markers of death hanging on his body. No, she said quietly. Shaking her head from side to side, she kept on repeating the word over and over again. No, no, no! This can't be happening. Tamari clutched her hair suddenly. This can't be. He can't be. Tamari's eyes began to blur and tears began to set in her eyes. Her hands shook. Her body quivered trepidatiously. She took Naruto's from Yujito and set him down on the ground as gently as she could. It was there that she wept openly. Gaara fell behind her and stared at Naruto's form. A confused stare at first, it quickly changed to non-belief and then into sadness. Tears began to flow from Gaara's black eyes as easily as water from spigot. Yujito's legs from under her fell. She braced her hands forwards to keep from hitting the ground entirely. Her face was in front of Naruto's face, his body's face. She hesitantly pulled one of her hands forward and cupped his cheeks in her palm. It was cold. She ran her fingers through his blonde spiky hair. It was soft. She leaned forward and planted a kiss on his lips. They were unresponsive. She blinked away the tears in her eyes, letting them fall forward and hit Naruto's cheeks. Soon his face was almost completely wetted from tears and grief. Sakura kneeled down next to her and began her medical diagnostic. When she did get there, Yujiro didn't know. The only thing she did know was that there was nothing in the medical knowledge that could bring back someone from the death. Sakura seemed to know this too from the sobs that began to wreck her body. Granny Chiho knelt down at his head. I've done horrible things in this life, she said dismally. I've killed for reasons that I don't know why. I turned my head on matters I should have looked into. I've been the cause of more death than most people on this planet ever will be. The grandma placed her hands on his forehead. But there is one thing that I can do before I die. It's going to be something worth doing. Yujiro grasped her wrists and slowly brought her head up to look at Chiho. What do you mean? She asked quietly but with force. A long time ago, I made a jutsu. It was originally for Sasori Boy, to bring his parents back. With this jutsu, I can bring back people to life all the expense of my death. This boy has done more good for the elemental nations than I ever have or could do in my long life. I'm going to perform this jutsu on him. I'm going to do something good for a change. A few hand seals later, a green aura erupted from Chiyo's hands. A few seconds through, Chiyo smiled a tragic smile. But it looks like I don't have enough chakra to do anything. Chiyo felt a hand on her back. She looked to the side and realized it was Yujito, and Yujito was pulling from her own depleted reserves in order to bolster Chiho's own. More hands came up to join the first. Sakura's, Kakashi's, Gaara's, they all joined in effort to give her the chakra needed to bring Naruto back to life. A crowd began to gather reinforcements from the alliance. Team Guy, brocades from Sands. Everyone watched in impatience as Naruto was brought back to life. With her last look at the world, Chiho saw the hopeful faces of all the nations, people coming together and hoping for the life of their own. She saw happiness, fear, sadness, everything that conveyed there, saying how much they wanted this man back in the world. His blue eyes slowly opened and her black ones slowly closed. He coughed a little, causing a roar of excitement and happiness throughout the crowd. Yujito's breath hitched as she suddenly raised his head and upper body from the ground. What's going on? His question was cut short when Yusto crashed her lips on his. It was a sloppy kiss full of tears and breath and happiness. Oh, the happiness that was filling Yusto's heart to the brim. Naruto's confusion kept on racking up by the minute. Eventually, he was pulled away from Yusto and brought into a ribcage crushing hub by Temari. Then from Sakura. Guys, what's going on? A hand that was pulled into a fist was slammed into his solar plexus, pushing the air out of his lungs. Sakura, who was a predator of the action, whispered, "Don't ever do a stunt like that ever again." Even if her actions was violent, her voice was happy. Yusto got a hold of him once again and held on so tight, never letting him go. She never let go of him again, not while she had a breath to breathe. Chapter 33. The Best Laid Plans. The next few days were like a whirlwind for Naruto. Day 1. It was dark, it was dank, it was dismissal in the place that Naruto called his mind. Well, that's not exactly true because the mindscape, and this has been mentioned previously, isn't really a reflection of the person's state of mind, more a reflection of their inner chakra system. So people usually have some sort of imaginary to reflect that. Underage, caves, sewers, concrete hallways, really anything that has a visually tunnel-like form, and with no exception has water running along the bottom. Naruto knew that, but he needed some brooding time. Going poetically emo was just about the most he was going to do now. He was sitting cross-legged in front of the cage that held QB, or at least what was left of the QB. The giant construct had shrunk down to the size of a fox, about double the height of a normal person, although it was hard to discern the true size of Kurama because it was curled into a fetal position. Naruto sighed and rubbed the metal bars that he held him away from his newfound friend. Its chest was rising and falling at intermediate time periods. More than once Naruto was afraid that Kurama died on him. Naruto didn't know how Kurama worked. Could it even die? If not, then why was it obviously showing pain? The one time Naruto tried to get past the bars and comfort it, it began thrashing around in fitful nightmares. He'd vacated to just outside the bars. After that, and contented himself with just looking after the big fox. Immediately after, Naruto managed to befriend the fox, to show it that it can count on humanity, to show it that someone out there could love it unconditionally. It lost so much of itself that it was comatose. Kurama, the giant nine-tailed fox and Naruto's friend, was comatose. He didn't blame Yusto, who went through so much to retrieve him from the clutches of Akatsuki. He didn't blame Sakura, who risked her life to allow Yusto and Kakashi to chase after the mad bomber. He didn't blame Kakashi, who was nearly blown up for his sake. He didn't blame Chiho, who literally gave her life to him. But it was hard for him. If they had just been infinitesimally faster, if Team Guy had fought just a little bit harder, Kurama wouldn't be comatose. Naruto didn't want to think these thoughts. It made him feel bad, like a petulant child who didn't get his way regardless, as he gazed at the fox, who was having trouble breathing at the moment. These thoughts surfaced into his physique against his will. He didn't have any right to be angry. He didn't have any right to throw a temper tantrum. He didn't have any right to be dissatisfied how his friends and companions held themselves throughout the mission, because they had and did any worse. Kurama would likely be dead or gone, or whatever happened to giant constructs of chakra when they got used up. After his awakening, Gaara flew them all the way back to Suna, where they all swapped stories of what happened to them. For Naruto, it was tiring to be resurrected, so they all decided to stay the night and head back in the morning. Right now, he was sleeping and contemplating the meaning of friendship and the bonds they are created when one makes those friendships, while starting with sobered eyes at the body of Kurama. Light footsteps began echoing all across the room. They were heard to the pin down because Naruto's back was turning and the sound was bouncing all across the room. But he didn't have to be a rocket scientist to know that they were approaching him. Eventually, they stopped when the unknown was right at his side and sat down next to him, not saying a word. Much louder sound of water becoming forcibly pushed to the side became out behind him. In the soundless room, they created enough decibels to almost fool Naruto into thinking he was right next to a roaring waterfall. Eventually, they stopped too when the second unknown paddled to his side and laid down next to him. The two obviously were Yuichito Ni and the Nibi no Nekomata Matatabe. After a bit of three of them sitting there quietly, Yujito still having a greater height and strength than Naruto pulled him into her lap and held on to him tightly. He laughed a little bit at this show of comfort, he said in a jokingly manner. It's pretty emasculating when you do that. I don't care, she retorted in the same joking manner. You obviously have no idea what the concept of self-preservation means. So Mommy Cat has to take care of her kitten from now on. Naruto leaned his head back onto her shoulder until his lips were almost touch her jawline. He said quietly, calling yourself a mommy is pretty weird after you practically shoved your tongue down my throat. Yuichiro chuckled throatily at that. I thought you guys liked that stuff. Only the ones with mother complexes. Yuichiro turned her head and planted a kiss on his temples. So what should I refer to myself then, if you don't like mommy? Naruto brought a hand up and began tracing her jawline. Why not Neko? Nope. Kitty, try again. One-chan. Wouldn't that mean that you have a sister complex? Joking, just joking. Naruto said airily. How about Miss Uzumaki? Yuichiro laughed a little bit at that. Miss Uzumaki? If anything, you're going to be called Mr. Ni. Mr. Ni? Naruto was said with an air of fine incredibility. So, I'm taking your name then. Is everything else going to be taking your name? I have half mind to make them. Kurtsuchi and Fu don't even have last names. It might take some convincing to get Tamari to take it up. I'm sure May wouldn't mind. She seemed up for anything. Kurtsuchi ni, huh? Has a ring to it, I guess. Well, of course, they're going to take it. After all, I'm the alpha female. Yuichiro said a little sarcastically. The alpha female? Naruto said, running with it. Kurotsuchi and Fu aren't going to be happy with that. Well, they're just going to have to deal with it. I'm the strongest here. I love you the most. I'm the oldest. By a significant margin. Naruto said, to which Yuichiro bonked him on the head for whilst rubbing his hurt cranium. Naruto bleated out a question. What was that for? You're not supposed to mention a girl's age, Yuichiro said resolutely. Well, I'm not talking to a girl. I'm talking to a mature woman. Naruto said the last part huskily in her ear. Do I need to give you two some room? Matatabe asked, speaking for the first time since she sat down. If you wouldn't mind, said Yuichiro. Oh, you really wouldn't mind that? Naruto said. Feels okay in the mindscape, but when you wake up, you're going to need to clean up a huge mess. Then I guess I'll just have to play with the waiting game, huh? I guess so. The fact that Yuichiro loved him in a less than sisterly manner was very much shock for Naruto at first. Of course it would be. It came to right out of the left field and threw him for a loop. But it wasn't a feeling that Naruto was unhappy to reciprocate. He loved Yuichiro more than a lot of things in this world. She was always there for him, there to give him a hug, some words of encouragement, or a slap on the face when he needed it. Because she was in his life, he benefited from it inherently. So when it turned out that she loved him as a man instead of a little brother, he knew that he loved her as a woman instead of a bigger sister. It wasn't such a huge paradigm shift. After all, it wouldn't be slightly difficult to explain the content of their relationship and how it came to be if anyone asked. But that didn't matter to Naruto or to her. They loved each other. They loved each other for a very long time now, and they probably will love each other a lot longer. He saw her for who she was, and she saw him for who he was. Yuichiro was harsh, sometimes cold, demanding, kinda needy, and very serious. Naruto was idealistic, a little bit of stupid, overage, not willing to let things go, and set in his want to make bonds and retain them. These were character traits that they don't like and look past in each other. They were there and they were there to stay. In other words, Naruto loved Yuito not because she was kind, protective, positive, strong, beautiful, mature, and so on. He loved her not only for her good traits but also for her bad ones. He loved her for all that she was. He loved her when she reminded him for doing something stupid. He loved her when she held him close and comforted him. He loved her when she put him through the grinder for training. He loved her and he always will love her. The same could be said for Yuichiro. She loved him when he exclaimed in joy at finally mastering a jutsu. She loved him when he unwittingly said something stupid. She loved him when he held on to her at night. She loved him and she always will love him. They understood each other. The understanding was there for before Yuichiro kissed Naruto when she found out he was alive. Naruto snuggled closer into her embrace. Thanks, he finally whispered quietly to her. This conversation was really what he needed right now. Something insane and stupid that could make him laugh and get his mind off things. Yuichiro nodded and held on to him just a bit tighter. She was only half joking when she told him that she never let him go. Seeing as how he has a penchant for getting into danger, but that wasn't the only thing that made her want to hold on to him. Even in this dark mindscape, he was warm and comforting to touch her. She just liked touching him or being near him or holding on to him. He just emanated that kind of feeling to her. Matatabe got up and began pacing around the joint mindscape a little bit. Every once in a while, she paw a little bit at the bar, keeping them away from the QB. Do you think? Matatabe started but trailed off before she could finish her thoughts. Naruto looked up at her and grunted for confirmation. Do you think it'd be okay to get rid of the seal? This sentence was said with pauses in between, as she was confirming this train of thoughts as she was saying it. Naruto looked up at her in interest. I don't know why. It's better than just waiting for Kurama to get better. If I get this seal away, then we could probably help Kurama. Naruto's interest was certainly getting piqued. You mean you can help Kurama? Why didn't you say so before? Matatabe looked too decisive on her own points. I don't know. Maybe it's just it can't hurt, right? Matatabe started pacing around again. It's hard to see Kurama in the state like it's in. Then at least we can do it and cage it, right? So it wasn't that she couldn't help Kurama, it's just that she didn't like seeing it caged like that. Naruto got up from Yuichiro, who stood up as well, and faced the cage that held Kurama away. Even if something bad happens when I get rid of the cage, I don't think there'd be much to affect on me. Kurama just doesn't have the chakra for it anymore. Anytime Jiraiya had the time to come by at the training camp, he made it to a point to instruct Naruto on advancing sealing and chakra theory. Naruto was getting help in every single aspect aside from those, so those were the what perverted sage went with. So those were what the perverted sage went with. Sorry about the prevented. Anyways, although he had gotten a lot of lectures using a lot of diagrams and simplistic analogs, Naruto never really took the subject all that much. Even now, he knew how chakra interacted with people and things just a little bit better. So he wasn't afraid anything big might happen if he got rid of the seal on Kurama. The Uzumaki made a claw-like hand impression and held it slightly in front of his navel. Then made a twisting motion. Jiraiya, in his infinite wisdom, also deemed Naruto was fit enough to hold the key to the Kyuubi's prison. Seeing as the sage could see the efforts that Naruto was going through trying to befriend it. Whoa, I didn't think you want to do this. It was a male voice, kind, light, a little bit hesitant. Naruto froze in a moment, halted to the gates, imminent opening preemptively. Slowly, ever so slowly, Naruto turned around to see what awaited him. Directly behind him was a guy. He had long spiky blonde hair, was wearing a robe that had red flames licking the bottoms, looking kind of nervous. He had a big smile on his face and was rubbing the back of his head nervously. Naruto's breath hitched in his throat. This was the man that he looked up to for the most part of his life. This was the man that put Kurama in him in the first place. This was the man that had made the blunder of signing 4 marriage contracts on one go. This was the man who had a hand in creating him. He was Minato Namikaze. He was Naruto's father. He was dead. He was standing in Naruto's mindscape. He questioned these thoughts in his mind. Silence regained over for the sharp mindscape of for 10 seconds. Minato was the one who broke the silence. Hi Naruto, I'm your dad. My name is Minato Namaika. His eyes opened as wide as they could go in pain and surprise as he suddenly found a knee directly in his stomach. Naruto stood over the kneeling man. I don't know what to say. Naruto breathed hard and was trying to damage to hold back the tear in his eyes. If there was any sort of situation that Naruto would have anticipated, it would not be meeting his dead father in his mindscape. Naruto looked up at Uchiha, who watched everything so far with slight incredulity. Is this a genjutsu or something? Naruto asked. Uchiha wide-eyed shook her head slowly from side to side. Minato, thinking he was the one the question was directed to, got up and answered Naruto's question with comically higher pitched voice than usual. No, Naruto, this isn't a genjutsu. I really am your father. When I was sealing the cube inside of you, I imparted a piece of my chakra as well, so I could counsel you not to unseal the cube when you begin to lose yourself. Naruto began to calm down his breathing. That's pretty convenient, don't you think? Why couldn't you seal away some of your chakra to meet me before this? I had to go through the first 13 years of my life not knowing who my parents were. I thought you two just abandoned me in the orphanage. Minato rushed forward and brought his arms around his son in comforting and embrace as he managed. I know that I put you in an unfair situation, Naruto. I'm so sorry for that. I did the best I could under the situation. Naruto's face twisted to a grimace. He wrapped his arms around his father and he held him as tightly as he could. Tears were flowing freely from his eyes. Minato would have continued to enjoy the familial embrace were it not for the knee he found buried in his crotch, exacerbating the previous nut shot. Minato wheezed out his lungs and sunk into it. You really have to stop doing that. Naruto wheezed out. You fucked up. Naruto set his face back to normal, wiping tears away from his cheek. I know. I'm sorry for having you shoulder the burden of fate. You needed the power of QB to even have a chance of surviving against the... No. Naruto interrupted. You fucked up in much different way. Minato looked up from the ground confusedly at his son. Naruto pointed up at behind him where Yushito and Matatabe were watching in silence. Yushito nervously waved at her father-in-law while Matatabe decided to sit down and look as regally imposing as she could. Minato stared at the two in shocked silence. Ever so slowly, he turned his head away from the two and looked back at his son. You're going to have to explain some things, Minato said finally. Some very simplified explanations later. Minato was very silent. So you mean you're Yuji and you're Nibi no Nekomata Matatabe? Minato said, pointing the two in question. And when I was in my office using shadow clones, I signed 4 marriage contracts simultaneously, then forgot about it. Not only that, but about 14 years later, all the villagers decided to take those marriage contracts seriously. You got your arm cut off while trying to protect a Jinchuriki who was a dictator. Then you lose your life trying to protect your friend who was a Kazekage and a Jinchuriki and was brought back to life. But now you're romantically involved with 3. Yushito interrupted. Minato winced a little bit. 3 of your now 5 wives, the QB whose name is Kurama and doesn't have a set of gender, got sucked out of you, but not all of it, only most of it. It is also one of your precious peoples. Now you're sleeping in Suna and are about to set out to the training camp where shinobi of all villages come together to share their techniques and learn how to get along with each other. Naruto nodded. Pretty much. Minato began rubbing his chin in thought. How old are you, by the way? Minato asked and Yushito. I'm 29. He's 16. Yushito said simply. Minato chuckled a little bit. I'm so glad Kushina isn't here. Minato said under his breath. I know she'd kill me for sure if I wasn't already dead. Naruto turned his attention to Kurama. I'm going to unseal Kurama now. It doesn't have enough chakra to hurt me, even if it gets out. Minato looked at the big force in consideration. I won't get out either way. Most Jinchuriki seals have it, so even if the seal is unlocked or destroyed, it still be up to the Biju whether or not to come out. If it comes out and it had enough chakra, you die. But seeming as it is predisposed, Minato trailed off. Naruto nodded and put his hand back into a claw-like shape, then finished unlocking the seal. The gates opened swiftly away, and the giant gate slowly opened, showing Kurama the freedom it always wanted. Minato tooted out a few sounds of apprehension. I can't believe the QB is in such a state. Naruto walked into where the cage previously stopped and crouched down a safe distance away from Kurama. Naruto sighed and sad sigh. Yeah, I can't believe it either. Matatabe paused over to where Kurama was laying. One of her tails came forward and nudged it in her stomach. It breathed, hitched a little bit, but was unresponsive otherwise. Uchiha came over and wrapped an arm around Naruto to comfort him. Minato walked a bit closer than Naruto did, coming all the way up to Kurama's face, where he tentatively rubbed his hand on the top of Kurama's head. There was no change in its expression. Golden flake being lifting off of Minato's, giving him a divine appearance. Naruto looked up at his dad in shock and wondered, Dad, what's happening? Minato looked at his arms with an understanding gaze. The amount of chakra I put into you isn't enough for a prolonged existence. He put his hands on his hip and sighed. You know, I thought that when we'd meet for the first time since you were a baby, I thought it'd be a bit more dramatic, I guess. Naruto stumbled his way to where Minato was, Kurama no longer thrashing in his presence. Minato placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. I wish I could have been there to see you grow up. I wish I could have been there to see you graduate the academy, getting promoted to Chunin or meet your first girlfriend. Well, maybe not the last one. The one might have turned out to be a bit more painful on my side because of your mother. Minato smiled widely. Naruto chuckled against his will. Son, the only thing I want for you is to be happy. If you find your happiness, it would be the most of a father could wish for. Naruto looked away from Naruto and addressed Yuji. Also, I'd like you if you could look after Naruto. He really gets his personality from his mother after all. Yuji nodded, tiny little pinpricks of water concealing in her eyes. The scene in front of her was just too heart-wrenching for there not to be some sort of reaction out of her. And son, Minato turned his attention to Naruto once more said, Never forget this one thing. I am proud of you that of anything else I have ever seen a hand in making in my entire life. If your mother was here, she'd feel the same way as me. Naruto nodded, tear falling from his eyes all the way. Minato turned his back on Naruto and placed a hand on Kurama's head. What are you doing? Naruto rasped out. Minato rubbed Kurama's head lovingly. I'm going to take a page out of your mother's playbook and do something impulsive without thinking. He flashed Naruto one more smile before getting absorbed into Kurama's head. As soon as he was gone, Kurama's eyes opened suddenly. It thrashed around a little bit to get into a suspicious battle stance and began to breathe heavily. Its eyes were looked around the room, frantically trying to absorb all the information in the setting it was in at the time. Its eyes finally rested on Naruto. Kid, it asked in a voice that was uncharacteristically higher and lighter than it usually would have. What happened? The voice was somewhat androgynous in nature, no longer booming and deep. It was a voice of normal talking person, not the one of the ginormous Biju. Naruto took shock still for some seconds before rushing forward and enveloping Kurama in a tight, biggest, most heartfelt hug the big fox had ever felt in its entire life. Kurama no longer had the mass that it usually would have been, stumbled a little bit before falling on its ass. When did you get so big? It asked in wonder. Naruto buried his face into Kurama's belt of fur, too happy to vocalize what the situation the fox was actually in. Too happy to do much other than hold the fox as tightly as he could and not let go. Link break. Day 2. Tsunade was rubbing her temples as smoothly as she could under the situation that she was in. Front of her was a smiling Naruto and an aloof Kakashi, a slightly nervous Sakura, and a seemingly not caring Yuito who looked like all she wanted to do as to leave and get some shut-eye. Tsunade sighed from the upteenth time that day. You guys are going to give me an aneurysm someday. Well, it's a good thing that you're a medical shinobi, Naruto said, smiling not slackingly in the slightest. Tsunade glared was enough to make him rethink his previous statement. You know, so you can take care of that aneurysm. Jiraiya, Tsunade said to the sage to her right. Tell me again, why am I not allowed to place Naruto under house arrest? Jiraiya laughed uproariously and slapped Tsunade on the back of her few times. Are you kidding? Place the kid that he helped killing two Katsuki agents and who was resurrected from the dead under house arrest? That's absurd. There'd be riots. It's just going to happen again, Tsunade said. You told me with confidence that you thought Naruto was strong enough to take out members of Akatsuki if push came to shove. From the report of the situation I got, Naruto was taken out in matter of minutes after barely hurting Sasori at all. It was a bad pairing. Who knew Sasori made something Jinchurikis? Well, now he's gone. No one knows how to make any more of it. Tsunade silently seethed. I should punish you to the full extent that I am capable of, but I can't, because you helped save Gaara from having his Biju removed, and you still have yours, I guess. Naruto nodded happily. Yup, Kurama's looking a bit down, but still has chakra. Tsunade waved her hand to the side. Dismissed. Naruto, in a manner most unbefitting of his character, decided to sedately remove his hands or himself from the foldable chair and head out of the temporary commander's tent with slow, piercing movements. Yuito followed after him and began walking next to him side by side, her hands reaching downwards and grasped Naruto's hands into her, intertwining their fingers in a most loving fashion. It was strange in the training camp that no one seemed in their way as they continued to the 5 tents consisting of their housings. Yuito looked down with that little smile on her face to Naruto. He was smiling profusely, a victim of supreme happiness. She laughed. It was light, carefree, harmonious laughter, one that drew Naruto's attention back to her beautiful face. Her laughter proved to be infectious as ever. Naruto was starting to laugh slightly as well. What's so funny? He finally asked in between gouts of laughter. She stopped suddenly and peered down at him, still smiling. Quickly, she bent down a little bit and planted a big kiss on Naruto's mouth. Naruto's eyes grew wide in surprise for a second before he eagerly recuperated the kiss. It was only a moment to a chaste, but Naruto had other ideas as he brought a hand to the back of her head to hold her in place. Getting the idea, she leaned in even more and deepened the kiss. Their lips began sliding past each other, caressing and directing the other's movement in a moment of togetherness. Yuito took a handful of Naruto's hair for leverage and leaned her entire body against his, her curves sinking onto Naruto's own athletic body frame. Her other arm was wrapped around his waist, holding him to her. They continued to interlock embrace up until Naruto tried to move his foot away to get some leverage. Only he didn't see the rock behind him foot. He tripped and fell on his back, dragging Yuito down with him. His hands felt the soft grass on the ground. The sun was suddenly blocked by Yuito's body. She landed on her knees on either side of Naruto's body. Her torso was arched so that her head was directed in front of his. Her breath tickled his nose and mouth. She was panting. Her eyes were flushed. Her eyes were half lidded but were completely focused. She landed small little kisses on his jaw and neck, moving enticingly slowly towards his torso. Her index finger's nails grew about an inch in length as she dragged it down Naruto's shirt and jacket. At the very bottom, it opened up easily, bearing Naruto's front to her eyes. Naruto's eyes grew wider and wider as she did this. It was at this point that she was licking Naruto's abdomen upper body, tracing the curves of his musculature. That Naruto gently laid a hand on her shoulder and pushed her away. Their eyes met. She resigned herself to something and nodded so incrementally that Naruto felt like he might have imagined Yuito. Her hands reached down her back and pulled at something Naruto wouldn't see. Her front armor piece slanked visibly, and she quickly sucked it away. It was when her hands grasped the bottom of her long shirt that Naruto intervened and grabbed her hands in his, halting them from their progress. "Look, Yuichito," Naruto said, huffing a little bit at the adrenaline in his system. "Don't you want to start somewhere a bit more?" Naruto looked around at the tents pitched all around them and the wide open blue sky above them. "Private?" Yuichito looked around as well before offering a simplistic, "No, no one's here right now, but they might come back soon." Yuichiro leaned her body forward, making Naruto lean back until the nape of his neck was resting on the fine grass. "I don't care." She said these words softly, but with a definite severity to their meaning. Naruto grabbed her waist and rolled over. Now on top, he leaned close to her ear as well. "Well, I do. I wanna keep you all to myself." Yuichiro grinned at such a cheesy response and conceded to his point remarked by when she tried her front armor piecing back to her torso. They both stood and faced each other a little awkwardly before Naruto offered his hand, which she took happily. They continued walking on their merry way, looking like nothing happened at all, except for Naruto's ruined shirt and jacket. After a few minutes of walking, Naruto broke the silence. "So, what was so funny, Naruto made a few random unsure hand gesticulations. "Before you forced me on yourself, you were laughing a lot." "What was so funny?" Yuichito gave a small huff in amusement. "First of all, I didn't hear you complaining. Naturally, I was just so scared." Naruto sat with a shitty grin. Yuichito sent a knowing glare at him. "And second of all, I don't have a reason." "No reason?" Naruto said. Yuichiro wrapped her arms around his body. "I don't need a reason to laugh if I'm happy enough." Link break 2.5 days. "Hey Naruto, I need to talk to you for a second." Kurotsuchi refused to meet Naruto's eyes and was clutching an elbow with one of her hands. "Okay," Naruto said simply. Yuichiro and Naruto had just made it to the tent area where they usually would sleep, and to put it mildly, Yuichiro was hoping for a little alone time with Naruto. They seemed for not, however, because Kurotsuchi needed Naruto for a second. Kurotsuchi glanced at Yuichiro, then at Naruto alone. She added. It took Naruto 2 seconds to process her words and the ramifications that were held in them. Kurotsuchi was never meek. She never hesitated to speak her mind in the bluntest way possible, and she never would refuse to make eye contact with Naruto. Oh, sure." Naruto trapped Yuichiro's elbow trapped around his neck. "1 second," he said to the Catwoman in question. Yuichiro looked mildly annoyed but relented, noticing the serious atmosphere that suddenly pervaded upon their sleeves. She made a beeline to the hot spring in order to give them some space. Kurotsuchi reached out and tugged on Naruto's sleeves, drawing him into their tent. Naruto had a mask of seriousness and concern about the situation he was in. Once inside, she sat down on the cot and bade him to follow his suite. She looked nervously. Naruto noticed. There were black bags under her eyes. Her hands were shaking. She didn't look like she'd bathed in a few days, so she stuttered out, I see that you and Yuichiro are..." She didn't finish her sentence. Naruto's eyes were Kurotsuchi. Naruto said resolutely and flatly, Do you have a problem with me and Yuichiro?" He couldn't finish his sentence either. This was one of the few things that kept him at the night, quarreling and being forced to choose between his wife. God damn it. He knew that this thing wasn't going to work out. Research is so full of shit. He could only say that how could one man be happily married to 5 wives? Actually, it would be quite easy for one man to be happily married to 5 women. The real question would be how could 5 women be happy to marry one guy? Naruto hung his head in shame. I'm sorry," he said, cutting her off. I can't choose between you and her. It wouldn't be fair." Kurotsuchi's lips turned upwards into a dark sort of smile. "I'm not about that," she said wistfully. It was just making an observation thing, I guess." Naruto breathed out a sigh of relief. "That's good to hear," he said under his breath. "Wait, so what did you talk about?" Kurotsuchi opened her mouth once again, then shut it. Then opened it again and then shut it again. This happened a few times more until Naruto grabbed her hands in one of his and put a hand to her chin so she could point it out to him and looked her in the eyes. Now the quarreling was out of the realm of possible things they could make her like that. Naruto was scared of what really was making her act so uncharacteristically. What is wrong? He asked, comforting as a tear begins to coalesce at the corner of her eye. Her nose scrunched, her lips were quivering. I. No matter what, she could make the words take form. Naruto leaned in explosively and kissed her quivering lips. He wrapped his arms around her back and brought her in until she was sitting in on his lap. He broke the kiss and held to him as closely as he could. What's wrong? You can tell me. Naruto whispered into her ear. I'm pregnant. Kuretsuchi said into his ear. Naruto still did. But what? I'm pregnant. Kuretsuchi said again, her torso beginning to rack itself and sobs. And you don't have to worry about it. She said into his ear full of despair. I'm going to get rid of it, so you don't have to worry. Naruto put his hands on her shoulder and pulled her away from him. She was arm's length away when she saw the look on his face. It was dumbstruck, like he had been hit in the face with a shovel. You're pregnant, Naruto said unbelievingly. Kuretsuchi nodded, tears leaking out of her ducts like mad. I'm going to get rid of it. You don't have to. You're pregnant, Naruto said once more, lips slowly curling upwards to becoming a smile. Kuretsuchi shut her eyes and nodded, noticing how Naruto's face was unbelievingly dumbstruck and was turning into one hopeful jubilance. You're pregnant, he said, voice out of breath for some strange reason. You're pregnant, he said a little louder and happier. Kuretsuchi tentatively opened her eyes to see Naruto's body, shaking with excitement. I'm going to be a dad, he said, completely having put the abortion thing out of his mind subconsciously. You're okay with it? But the Katsuki can go suck a dick for all they care, Naruto said loudly and happily. You're pregnant, and I'm going to be a dad. Naruto brought her back to his torso for a full-on bear hug. Kuretsuchi allowed him to hug onto her for dear life. The situation was unexpected. The most she had thought would be Naruto to silently and sadly take up the mantle of responsibility and find a sadness over her choice of having an abortion, but ultimately allow her to do so. He was completely unequally decisively happy about the news. He hugged her for all that he had to hug, laughing breathlessly at the news. I have to tell everybody, Naruto said, suddenly pulling back just to he could look in her eyes. She gave him a somewhat cross look. I don't think so. Naruto wasn't going to take no for an answer. He picked her up bridal style and ran around the tent as quickly as he could. As he went, he just started shouting out the results of their unison wildly and recklessly to anyone who listened. Hey you, I'm going to be a dad. Oi, I got my wife pregnant. My kid's going to be a royalty. He went on and on like that, going off on random tangents. Sometimes he was so excited, Kuretsuchi just went with it. Eventually she began to laugh in a way that only a person who had been previously crying could laugh. She laughed out of joy, out of happiness, out of relief, out of a lot of things. Hey dad! The statement caught Kuretsuchi's attention, forcing her to look at who Naruto was directing that to. He was a bulky man with a pronounced upper jawline. He and Naruto had been getting along well enough that he insisted on the Uzumaki calling him dad. Kuretsuchi looked away from the students he was teaching about earth manipulation to see his son-in-law carrying his daughter bridal style before he could get out any sort of interrogation. Naruto finished the thing he just wanted to say. I put a baby in your daughter. You're going to be a granddaddy. And just like that, Naruto was off like the wind, trying to tell everyone how happy he was about the news. Kitsuchi blinked once and allowed the words to get processed in his head. It took him for solid 10 seconds to process it, and in the time that it took, his students began to get kind of worried. Sir? Kitsuchi looked at the students who spoke in question. What? He said gruffly. Are you okay? The student asked. It took a while for him to answer. I don't know. Hey dog breath! Naruto shouted at Kiba, just when he was turned around enough to look in Naruto's general direction. Naruto shot past him. I'm going to be a dad! Naruto shouted at him. Hey Ino! Naruto shouted at the Yamanaka. She looked up a little to see what Naruto was moan about. Really, he got excited over the simplest things before she could ask what he wanted. He shot past her. I got Kurtsuchi pregnant. He shouted back at the dumbfounded Ino. Hey Choji, guess what? I'm going to be a dad. Naruto said to the Akimichi in a rapid succession. He was gone before Choji could raise his head from the meal he was eating. Neji, Tenten, Lee, Guy, he said to the four members of Team Guy who were walking steadily, talking amongst themselves. Kurtsuchi pregnant with my kid. Not even Lee could track how fast he was moving at this point. Hey Shino, I'm going to be a dad. Naruto said, jostling Kurtsuchi around a bit to bring attention to her. She giggled a little bit and half-heartedly snorted at him. He was off before Shino could tell Naruto that he knew before the blonde did. Hinata, Kurtsuchi is pregnant. He was gone before Hyuga could politely say congratulations to his face. Samui, Karui, Amoe, he said to the cloud trio. I got Kurtsuchi pregnant. Just when he was out of earshot, Karui nudged Samui in the sides. Aren't you glad that you didn't hop on the train when you could? Samui smiled a little bit. Yeah, that kind of life just wasn't for her. Oi, Parvise, Naruto shouted at Jiraiya. I had sex with Kurtsuchi and got her pregnant. Jiraiya was passed by Naruto, but not before he could give out one of the patent bro fist after finding out one of your bros got laid. Bro fist for that particular comment. Naruto got hit in the head by a slightly indignant Kurtsuchi, although she was too happy to stay mad at the blonde lug. Shikamaru, Naruto said to the direct question. I got Kurtsuchi pregnant. Shikamaru didn't reply for several seconds because of the game of chess he was playing. When he did, Naruto was long gone. Sakura, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto shouted at the pink-haired teammate and his aloof sensei. He stopped directly in front of her and elevated his wife slightly. She flung her arms wide and paid. I'm pregnant. They were gone again before the two could comment. Naruto sure works fast, Kakashi said mostly to himself before getting back to the pond that he was distracted from. Sakura snapped her fingers in realization. So that's what was wrong with them, she said mostly to herself before trying to get a beat on Naruto to properly congratulate him. He was way too far now for her to do anything. Hey Granny, Naruto said, barging into the commander stand. Kurtsuchi is pregnant. He was out of the tent before the pen Tsunade was holding could hit her desk. She looked wide-eyed at the tent flap fluttering in the man-made wind where the married couple had been at prior moment. A smiling Shizune was smirking to herself quietly behind the elder Senju. Akatsuchi! Kurtsuchi yelled at the large childish teenager. I'm pregnant! Before he could even turn around, the two were dust in the wind. Hey Tamari, Kurtsuchi is pregnant, Naruto said to the wind mistress, actually stopping in front of her for once. She held up a hand. Yeah, I gathered. Naruto eyebrows furrowed. Is the information all across the camp yet? Well, it doesn't help that you two are just going around shouting out at the top of your lungs that you're pregnant. Naruto started joking in place. We can't let the information get to anyone other than by us, Naruto said in a comic worried tone. Kurtsuchi giggled. No, I guess we can we? With that, Naruto shot off in another direction, leaving Tamari in dust. Congratulations, by the way, Tamari said to an empty air where the two used to stand. Yujito! Naruto shouted out in the hot springs, afraid to go in the lest he accidentally slipped on the surface with his sandals. What? She shouted out. Kurtsuchi is pregnant. What? I'm pregnant. Great for you. It's great. Naruto shouted before he could jet off to find more people to tell the good news. Kurtsuchi tapped his cheek a few times. You know, Pooh's pregnant too. Naruto's face lit up even more, if it were even possible. Pooh! Pooh looked away suddenly from the training dummy she was slicing up, using her hot water blade to see Naruto bolting towards her with Kurtsuchi in his arm. Pooh's face softened at that look of contentment on Kurtsuchi's face. Pooh! He shouted again, albeit slightly lowered in volume this time. When he got close enough, Pooh leaned in cutely and gave an elongated yes to the Uzumaki. You're pregnant? He said excitedly, scooping Pooh up in his bag. We need to tell everyone this good news. Link break. Day 3. Warning. Lemon ahead. Yes, a little bit of lemon. Naruto was leaning back in his little coot. A little bit had happened that day, so he was fairly mentally pooped. First, May came back from Kiri and chewed him out something fierce when she learned that he died during the mission, that the only thing that kept him alive was the hand of the machine. Other than that, Tsunade alerted the rest of the Kages about the pregnancies, prompting an impromptu meeting between the leaders of the continent. It was an unanimous agreement that at the very least the two pregnant wives should stay at a safe house somewhere, not only to give them protection but also to provide them a good area to bring up their kids. May suggested a B-side resort on an island very close to the main one that the Kiri was located on. Once she gave the details of all the things the place had to offer, everything agreed to it. After all, they all had safe houses of one kind or another all over their respective countries, but none situated to catering the needs of two pregnant ladies like the resort did. Kurtsuchi didn't like it at first, but was convinced when she learned she could continue lightly training there with the small training grounds attached to it. In the end, because the resort was so huge, Naruto and Koro decided to all go there. Temari had actually never been to the beach, and Yujito, although wasn't too keen on the sea, wanted to go wherever Naruto was going. It looked like things were really looking their way. That is until Kurtsuchi and Fu heard about him dying on the rescue mission. Oh, there was so many tears and slaps across his face at the calling a certain someone a certain phallic symbol. Yup, when they learned that their father of their unborn children might have died on them, they made him promise to never go into harm's way again. Seeing as he was a ninja, he persuaded them to eventually drop the promise to never go into perilous harm's way. They were still pretty stewed about the whole thing, but he didn't expect them to not come to the bed with him. As this is where I'm going to be leaving this part of, guys. I hope you like this one, and if you do, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and the lemon is going to be in the next one, so stay tuned for that. And other than that, the next part of What If Naruto the Blonde's feature is going to be up as well later today, and comment down below if you want me to include the lemon in the next part or not. And this is Apollo Uchiha, and I'm signing out. Peace.